Miraculous Ladybug is a show that has risen in popularity throughout its runtime these past 8 years. The action, allure of the love square, and the lore of the Miraculouses and the characters were nothing like we had ever seen before, and it truly had the potential to be great, which it kind of was in the beginning, but hasn't even been close to good in quite a while. Which brings up the question, what exactly went wrong with Miraculous Ladybug? Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Nomonde here, and I have finally returned to give you guys my 2 cents on the show we all know and sometimes love, Miraculous. I won't lie, Miraculous Ladybug started off quite great. I'll even go as far as to say the show was quite excellent, but after watching the season 5 finale a few months ago, saying I was annoyed would be a huge understatement. The finale and the show in general has been stuck inside my mind this whole time, and for all the wrong reasons. And after watching the Paris special and the Awakening movie, which were an absolute delight to sit through, it really took me back and made me wonder, what happened to the show? Where did we go wrong? When did it all go wrong? It is no secret to the Miraculous fandom that this show has a lot of problems and is a prime example of wasted potential. But through all its flaws, most of us kept watching. Throughout the release of season 5, a lot of Miraculous's problems became very obvious, to the point where a lot of fans I know couldn't ignore them anymore and ended up dropping the show. And you really can't blame them, because one of those problems, and dare I say the biggest one, has to be the poor execution of ideas from the people in charge. I'm going to start off with a little background information so you can see where I'm going with this. Starting off with Jeremy Zag, who is the CEO of one of the companies that produces Miraculous Ladybug. It is also worth noting that he's the director of the Miraculous Awakening movie, which, compared to the show, is an absolute masterpiece. But if you want to hear my thoughts on the movie, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll get to working on it. The creator of Miraculous, however, Thomas Astruc, is the one I think most of the fandom is familiar with. It is no secret to Miraculous fans, especially the Twitter fandom, that Thomas Astruc has a history of being very vocal on the platform and has a tendency of blocking other creators, specifically fans of the show, mainly because he doesn't agree with the criticism and the questions about the show he receives on the platform. I just want to say that it is his account and his own decision on who he gets to interact with on there, but what I want to focus on is his replies to the questions he gets asked and how it ties into the show. So what I'm trying to get across is that the people in charge of the show don't do the best job at explaining certain concepts and character actions to the audience, making it necessary for us to run to the creator and seek explanations and motives for what happens in the show. But when asked for further explanations, you can see that the creator knows what message he wants to give, but doesn't do a great job at translating that idea onto the screen in terms of the show or in words when answering people's questions, and sometimes ends up confusing you even more. An example of this would be the glaring problem of the power dynamic between Ladybug and Cat Noir. According to Thomas Astruc, Ladybug isn't the boss, the chief, the captain, or the superior of Cat Noir. They are equal, but she leads because of her abilities. You can see that the creator himself sort of has an idea of what he wanted Ladybug to be viewed as. A powerful female hero who is the leader of a superhero duo. And there is absolutely no problem with this idea. I, for one, think it is an excellent idea. But it is the execution of said idea that was quite terrible. They say actions speak louder than words, and in the case of film, you should always opt to show, not tell. Miraculous struggles to effectively communicate and translate ideas on paper to the moving pictures on the screen. I understand that they are working on a time limit for the episodes, but there are countless other shows that still manage to convey meaningful messages and advance the storyline within the standard 25 minutes of a show. The idea that Ladybug and Cat Noir are equals has been told to us by saying that they're like yin and yang, and by them calling each other partners and stuff. But throughout the show, there has been a constant theme of Cat Noir, who is one of the protagonists, getting pushed into the background or playing a lesser role in order to make Ladybug seem more important. You can see this in the New York special, throughout season 4, and most infuriatingly at the end of season 5, which is completely unnecessary because Ladybug is more than capable of shining as the leader without putting Cat Noir down. The show becomes harder and more annoying to watch when you are constantly told that these two are equals when clearly they aren't treated as such. There is absolutely no problem with having a female lead, but if you have to remove the other protagonist or treat them like a side character in order to give the female protagonist the spotlight, then I hate to be the one to break it to you, but it's time to revisit the drawing board. Another thing I want to touch on in the spirit of poor execution is Marinette as the main protagonist. I know, as much as Adrien is directly related to Gabriel's arc in Miraculous, and having him as the main protagonist would have been an interesting take on the story, Marinette as the main protagonist is lots of fun. The show just doesn't do a good job at showing that to the audience and convincing us that this was the right choice. According to what we see from seasons 1 to 3, Marinette's character practically revolved around her being clumsy and the endless fails at confessing her feelings to Adrien. Oh, and that she's a designer. That's how we are introduced to Marinette, and for majority of the show, that's how it continues. Adrien, on the other hand, is seen and introduced as the poor tortured soul locked in his room by his father and forced to model after his mother disappeared, and all he wants to do is go to school like a real boy. But he's the hero known as Cat Noir and gets to be free when gallivanting around the roofs of Paris fighting villains. Not to mention, Sid's father is the main villain and wants to bring his mother back. The whole backstory of the Ogress with the Senti monster thing makes it inevitable that a select few would want the story to focus on him. But the way I see it, in order to be interesting, not every main protagonist's life needs to be falling apart at the seams, and that's what they decided to do by making Marinette the main protagonist. Marinette is interesting in her own way. She has dreams, aspirations, and deals with the constant troubles of being guardian and having these responsibilities that being Ladybug brings that were shoved onto her with no guidance or assistance from her mentor, while she's trying to be a normal girl with a normal life. In order to truly see this, you really have to insert yourself into the character's shoes to see why she does the things she does and understand her strengths, motivations, and weaknesses as a character. But the introduction of her stalker activities in the early seasons of the show overshadows how much of a good character, hero, and protagonist she is. It's also less obvious to the viewer that Marinette's character does have a certain depth to it, but it is clear from the get-go that Adrien is definitely going through it. Finding that balance between both protagonists is something the show never really quite grasped really well, and it has a hard time making these two protagonists share the spotlight and setting them up to be equals and partners, but not making one seem more important or interesting than the other. This might not seem as serious to the naked eye, but when you truly look at it, this power imbalance between our two protagonists ended up hurting the show, as this resulted in a bigger problem when it comes to how the show's storylines and arcs come to an end. And yes, I am talking about the end of season 5. It is no secret that Miraculous Ladybug makes some questionable decisions when wrapping up storylines. One of the best examples of this would be the season 5 finale and the ending of the Gabriel Ogress story arc. To refresh your memory a little bit, Ladybug ended up being the one to battle Monarch and learned that it was Gabriel who had been the main villain this whole time. She was the one to learn his identity and motivations, and she was the one who fought him in the end. Also joining the final battle was all the heroes we've seen previously in the New York and Shanghai World specials. All this took place whilst Adrien was in London. Literally, everyone was there except Cat Noir, which was extremely disappointing because his father was the main villain. We could have had a final confrontation between the two where both their identities were revealed to one another, but instead we got a Ladybug and Monarch final showdown, which I will admit didn't feel as totally undeserved because the tension between Ladybug and Marinette and Monarch and Gabriel respectively was slowly building throughout the season, with each growing increasingly frustrated with one another as the season progressed. But you can't tell me that Cat Noir being there wouldn't have been 10 times better. This finale was supposed to be the ending of Gabe's run as the villain of Miraculous, a storyline we've been following for the past 8 years. I'm sorry, But the ending of the story arc just feels a little cheap to me. It is a possibility that Adrien will never see his father ever again after he made the wish. And I want to throw away the idea that they are not telling him the truth because it will hurt him, and focus more on the impact of him not being there to actually experience the truth. From how we left things at the end of season 5, Adrien believes that his father helped Ladybug defeat Monarch. Adrien thinks of his father as a hero, although he was the cause of most of Paris's problems. Adrien is not allowed to actually see that his father was the main villain and know his motivations for what he was doing and what he did over the 5 seasons. He's not allowed to stand up to his father and tell him what he was doing is wrong, and it would have been some great character growth for him. Although it is inevitable that he will eventually find out the truth, him hearing about it and seeing it are two completely different things. We won't get to see his reaction to the truth, and by keeping the truth a secret from him, they are robbing Adrien of the choice on how he gets to view his father after he has all the information. I can't help but think that they avoided making Adrien the focus of the finale because it would draw attention away from Marinette, because they haven't yet established that balance between their roles and seem to have something against anyone that's not Ladybug being in the spotlight. Another theory of mine is that the writers actually wrote themselves into a corner by refusing to do the reveal prior to this finale, which caused the ending to be done in a terrible way. It is extremely annoying as a viewer to invest time and energy into a show for a long time, in the case of Miraculous Ladybug, over 8 years, only for the storylines to be wrapped up in a way that feels undeserved. An example of this would be Luca's story in the show. He was first introduced as Marinette's secondary love interest and the holder of the snake Miraculous, and became a character that the fandom grew to love. In season 4, he learned the identities of Ladybug and Cat Noir, but in season 5, they got rid of him, even though he could have contributed so much more. Again, in season 3, Luca and Kagami were introduced and were set up to be secondary love interests for Marinette and Adrien respectively. At the end of season 3, it seemed as though we were going to get a Lucanette and Ajigami romance plot throughout the next season, and really move the story forward by taking a break from the constant back and forth of the love square, only for these storylines to last all of 2 episodes. In seasons 2 and 3, we almost got a Chloe redemption arc that I still argue till this day would have felt natural and totally deserved. I genuinely believe that she was changing, and I grew from being Chloe's #1 hater to a Chloe and Queen Bee stan. But in the end, for some reason, the creator decided to scrap the idea and continue labeling her as the main girl of Miraculous. And lastly, although Lila's story is far from over, I can't help but feel that more could have been done with her, especially in seasons 4 and 5. In season 2, she was being set up to be a very manipulative, secretive person and an ultimate villain. I remember getting physically ill every time she popped up on my screen in season 2 and 3 because I hated her so much. But over time, she just lost that it factor for me. But I can't wait to see more of what she does in season 6 though. From these examples, we can see how Miraculous does a great job at building up the stakes, the tension, and the character motivation. But when it's time for the payoff, it all just falls flat, and the writers tend to back out of the story arc they were building up. For the past 8 years, they have been building up the Aggress story and giving us bits and pieces of it whilst we theorized and analyzed our hearts away. They brought the mystery, the stakes, and built a story that had audiences hooked globally. But when it was time to end the arc and actually have lasting consequences for the characters, it felt like the writers just backed out of the idea last minute, and I think that's also one of the things that made Miraculous's overall enjoyability just go down. Okay, so I'll admit, I have no idea what goes on in the writing room there by Miraculous headquarters, but based on what I can see from the show itself, the people in charge of the show seem to have something against just letting things end. Starting with one of the major things the writers just refuse to let die, and that's the love square. Let me elaborate. The love square is one of the concepts that made Miraculous so fun and exciting to watch. Cat Noir and Marinette being in love with Ladybug and Adrien respectively was such an interesting concept. Watching the interactions between Marinette, Lady Noir, Adriennette, and occasionally Ladrien, were so exciting because it felt like watching completely different versions of Adrien and Marinette interacting with one another in the many different combinations. The whole idea of the love square was fun, and fans of Miraculous Ladybug, myself included, were constantly waiting for the day when we would finally get a reveal. And then in season 3, Chat Blanc came and we finally got our reveal. But then we didn't. But then, in season 4, Ephemeral came along and we got another reveal. But then we didn't. I think you see where I'm going with this. The rise of the What If episodes was interesting at first, but we quickly reached a point where it felt as though we were getting nowhere with the story because all the characters ended up forgetting the events that took place in the episode. Then we reached a point in season 4 or 5 when the love square reversed and it finally felt as though we were getting somewhere, but it ended up being a little too late. I mentioned earlier how I think that the writers wrote themselves into a corner when it came to the season 5 finale, trying to reveal to Adrien and Gabriel that they've been fighting each other as Cat Noir and Monarch all this time, whilst still having Ladybug present without doing a Lady Noir reveal was impossible. I'm not here to give you an alternate ending to the season 5 finale, because there are so many people out there that have put out great alternate endings. But by what I've said, you can see how delaying the reveal ended up hurting the finale, because in order to show Ladybug who exactly she's been fighting all this time and not do a Lady Noir reveal simultaneously, Cat Noir and Adrien needed to be written out, which was not really an ideal ending to his father's villain story arc. The What If episodes, like the ones I mentioned earlier, tried to show us that Ladybug and Cat Noir couldn't reveal their identities to each other before Monarch was defeated, but I feel like those episodes were just an excuse to keep dragging the reveal and milking it for all it was worth. Because let's be honest, the love square and the anticipation of the reveal is what kept most of us watching, and you can't blame the creators for wanting to capitalize on that. There is a saying, all good things come to an end, but it seems like the writers see the love square as an exception, because it is a good thing that just won't end. The refusal to let it die whilst shoving fake reveals in our faces is what I feel caused the ultimate downfall of the love square, and in turn, the interest in the show itself fell. Ladybug and Cat Noir not knowing each other's identities led to so many issues that could have easily been resolved, and at some point, as Miraculous's audience grew old, so did the anticipation of the reveal. I don't know if I'm the only one that feels this way, but when the reveal does end up coming, I don't think I'll be as excited for it as I would have been about 2 years ago. And that lack of excitement is definitely owed to those What If episodes. If I'm being completely honest, they were excellent episodes. Ephemeral and Chat Blanc even fall into my top 10 favorite episodes of the entire show. But there comes a problem in Miraculous Ladybug when the parts, being the episode, are better than the whole, being the season, story arc, and storyline. While certain episodes are great, sometimes it feels as though the episodes don't have any lasting consequences or don't impact the overall story at all. Every episode is just another piece of a bigger story, and each piece has to fit in and actually feel as though it is contributing something to either make sure the story progresses and the characters are developed so that things move forward. In the case of Miraculous Ladybug, there will be times in the season where something important will happen in an episode, whether it be character development or story progression. But as soon as the end credits roll and it's time for the next episode, it's as though everything goes back to normal and no lessons were actually learned. It gets really annoying as the viewer to have to constantly watch the characters learn the exact same lessons over and over again. Initially, in seasons 1 to 3, I was able to turn a blind eye to the continuity issue, since the show was still following the standard Villain of the Week format. But from seasons 4 and 5, the issue became harder to ignore. For some context, we all saw that in season 4, the show was taking a more continuous approach with the writing, where it was more evident that the events of the previous episodes would have to impact future ones. This was even more evident in season 5, as some episodes didn't even focus on the villain or the fights, but rather the characters themselves and their interactions. Not all episodes felt as though they did something to progress the story, but the ones that did are the parts that are better than the whole. When you look at season 5 as a whole, the story had a few ups and downs. there were points when it would get really good and then really bad, then back to really good. These inconsistencies really messed with the pacing, not just in season 5, but throughout the show. For a show like Miraculous Ladybug, the narrative pacing fluctuated at times when it needed to pick whether to be fast or slow. With Lucanette and Adrigami, the storyline needed to unfold a little bit slower, probably taking up at least half the season, but instead it unfolded relatively fast. Throughout season 5 though, the different speeds at which the story unfolds makes it feel as though storylines were being rushed and that there was no real and proper development. When you watch an action-packed episode with incredibly high stakes, or an episode where a character gets major development points, only for an extremely dull few episodes to follow that, it just throws the entire season or storyline off. Because when you really look at it as a whole, when all the pieces are together, you'll find that not much happened and that it's not really that good. As I said, each episode was another piece of a bigger puzzle, whether it be the whole season or a part of the current story arc, and in the case of the later seasons like seasons 4 and 5, the previous episode's events impacted the next episodes, whether directly or indirectly, meaning that the episodes had to be watched in order. But when it comes to Miraculous Ladybug, that is a huge problem. There are a lot of things I don't like about Miraculous Ladybug, but the release schedule has to be the one thing I absolutely despise about this show. For as long as I can remember, Miraculous episodes have never come out in the order in which they're supposed to, which wasn't really a problem between seasons 1 and 3, because as I said before, in these seasons, the show was still following a more episodic type of thing. But as season 4 rolled around, the episodes being released out of order did more harm than it did good. The show became harder to follow, as you'd see the payoff from an event in one episode, then about a month later, you'd have to go backwards in order to see the setup, which didn't make watching either seasons 4 or 5 that much enjoyable. The episodes were good, but as I said, they need to work together to fit into the whole, not just in terms of writing, but even when the show is released. I really don't know who's in charge of when and what episodes get released, but the serious miscommunication and lack of organization between the various broadcasting channels and the people in charge really needs to be sorted out, because the episodes coming out of order really messes up with the viewing experience. Asterisk & Co. could create the most well-written, excellently paced, most magnificent season an animated film has ever had, but if it is released out of order and randomly without a proper schedule, all that doesn't matter very much. And as much as you could try to wait for the episodes to come out in order, you might get an instance like season 4 when that one episode 5 in the beginning of the season, Psychomedian, didn't come out for months, whilst we carried on and were mere episodes away from the season finales, which are episodes 25 and 26. You can never tell with this show how long you're gonna have to wait for episodes in the season to drop, and that gets really frustrating as a viewer. You could try to wait, but there's no guarantee that you won't see spoilers, whether it be from the fandom or from the TV channels themselves. So you're usually faced with that option of watching an episode even though you have no idea what happens 5 episodes prior, or allow yourself to be spoiled the moment you open social media. It is so frustrating as a viewer of this show as well when you see major leaks, spoilers, and teasers beforehand, so watching the rest of the episode or the season seems pointless. I know a lot of fans that just tapped out of the show as soon as the show Bible for season 5 was released, and sometime during season 4, Gloob released that one major trailer literally an hour before the episode dropped. Minor spoilers and teasers can enhance the enjoyment and build up the hype and excitement, but when you overdo it, like Miraculous does on multiple occasions, it really just throws you off, and the excitement for the content, and in turn, the show itself, just dies out. So, those have been my thoughts, and thank you so much for making it this far. I think we can all see that this show had so much potential to be great, and whilst it still has a relatively strong fan base, there is no denying that the hype for this show that was once there has slowly fizzled away. I, for one, will continue watching Miraculous Ladybug when season 6 comes out. mainly because I have made it this far and invested so much time and energy into this show to not see it through to the end, even if I have to wait another 8 years to see the reveal. But while we wait for the next chapter of Miraculous, I would love to continue making videos on other animated shows, movies, and coming-of-age films that you guys are interested in. So please leave suggestions in the comment section down below on stuff you enjoy or on some hidden animated gems you feel never really get the recognition that they deserve. With that being said, if you enjoyed today's video, feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications so that you do not miss out when I upload a new video. If you have any thoughts, anything that you would like to add, or you feel that I missed something in this video, don't hesitate to leave it in the comment section down below. I want to see what you guys have to say. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll definitely be seeing you guys in the next one. But for now, Andi out.